The room felt heavy after she said that. People were laughing nearby, but to me everything sounded far away. I stood there holding a paper cup of cold coffee, trying to understand how my own daughter could speak to me like that. Lauren didn't lower her voice. She wanted others to hear. She wanted me to feel small. I looked around and noticed how a few relatives suddenly avoided my eyes. Some pretended to be busy with their phones. Others whispered to each other. No one asked me what she meant. No one asked how I was holding up after losing my wife. In that moment, I realized how easy it was for people to accept a story that made them comfortable. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell them about the nights I slept in a chair beside Margaret's bed. About the months I learned how to manage her medication and calm her fears when she couldn't breathe. About how I put my own life on pause so she wouldn't feel alone. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded slightly, as if Lauren's words were already known to me. Lauren watched my face closely, waiting for a reaction. When she didn't get one, she looked almost disappointed. She told me I should prepare myself and stop acting surprised later. Then she walked away to join a group of cousins, smiling again like nothing had happened. I stayed where I was for a while. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. Losing Margaret had already taken so much out of me, and now it felt like I was losing my place in the family too. I thought about leaving early, but I didn't want to give anyone more reasons to judge me. An old friend of Margaret's came up and touched my arm gently. She didn't ask questions. She just said she was glad I came. That small kindness almost broke me. It reminded me that not everyone believed the worst without proof. As the gathering went on, I noticed Lauren moving confidently through the room, accepting sympathy and attention. People treated her like the natural center of everything. I stayed quiet, listening more than speaking. I realized something important that day. Lauren wasn't just angry with me. She was sure she had already won. I went home that evening alone. I sat in the living room where Margaret and I used to talk late into the night. I felt hurt, confused, and deeply tired, but I also felt something else. A calm I couldn't explain yet. Whatever Margaret had truly thought of me, whatever she had decided, I knew one thing for sure. The truth of our life together didn't change just because someone spoke louder. And for the first time since her death, I trusted that Margaret had not forgotten me. After Margaret became ill, everything in our life started to change, but not in the way people later claimed. At first, it was just doctor visits and long evenings at home. Then Lauren began showing up more often. She said she wanted to help, and I believed her. I was grateful at the time. I didn't see how carefully she was watching, listening, and deciding what story she wanted others to hear. Little by little, Lauren began speaking for Margaret. She answered questions before her mother could. She handled phone calls and told people Margaret was too tired to talk. When friends asked how we were doing, Lauren would sigh and say I was doing my best, in a tone that suggested it wasn't enough. I noticed it, but I told myself she was just stressed. As the illness got worse, Lauren started controlling who visited and when. If I wasn't in the room, she would tell people I was busy or resting. If I was there, she acted like I was in the way. I could feel myself being pushed to the side, but I stayed quiet. I thought arguing would only upset Margaret, and that mattered more to me than my pride. Soon, small comments turned into assumptions. People began to look surprised when I mentioned staying up all night with Margaret or managing her care. Some even joked that I must be relieved someone else was finally handling things. I didn't correct them. I believed the truth would speak for itself eventually. Lauren's version spread quickly. In her story, I was emotionally distant and more worried about money than my wife's comfort. She said I left everything to her while I checked out. Hearing that hurt deeply, but I told myself that once Margaret recovered, or even once people saw how things really were, it would all fade away. Margaret noticed the tension, even if she didn't always understand its source. Sometimes she squeezed my hand and thanked me for staying. Other times she looked confused, like she was hearing different stories depending on who spoke to her. I wanted to protect her from all of it, so I kept swallowing my feelings. By the time Margaret passed, the damage was already done. Lauren had spoken so often, so confidently, that her version felt real to others. My silence was taken as proof. I realized too late that saying nothing had allowed a lie to grow without resistance. I didn't lose my voice because I had nothing to say. I lost it because I thought love and truth were obvious. I was wrong. There was a time when Lauren and I were close in a way that felt unbreakable. When she was younger, she came to me with everything: school problems, heartbreaks, fears she didn't want to share with her mother. She used to say I made her feel safe, like nothing bad could reach her when she was around me. I held on to those memories for a long time. Things began to shift after Margaret's investments started doing very well. At first, it didn't seem important. The money was something we rarely talked about as a family. But Lauren became more interested in details she had never cared about before. She asked questions about accounts, property papers, and long-term plans. I thought she was just being responsible. Soon, Lauren insisted on helping with appointments and paperwork. She said it would take stress off both of us. Without asking, she started attending meetings that used to involve only Margaret and me. She sat closer, spoke louder, and made decisions quickly. I noticed that conversations no longer included me unless she wanted them to. Lauren began answering questions directed at me. When people called the house, she decided who should speak and who shouldn't. She told me she was just protecting her mother's energy. I wanted to believe her. I didn't want to think my own daughter would slowly push me aside. As time passed, I felt less like a husband and more like an outsider waiting for instructions. When I tried to discuss plans or concerns, Lauren acted impatient, as if I was slowing things down. She reminded me of my age, my old-fashioned thinking, and how complicated things were now. I started doubting myself. Margaret noticed the distance between Lauren and me, but she was often too tired to question it deeply. Lauren stayed close to her, always present, always speaking gently. I stayed in the background, telling myself this phase would pass once things settled. But it didn't. The more Lauren took over, the less room there was for me. Family decisions happened without my input. I learned about changes after they were already made. When I tried to step back in, it felt awkward, like I was interrupting something I no longer belonged to. By the time Margaret passed, I didn't recognize my place in the family anymore. I lived in the same house, but emotionally, I felt like a visitor. The daughter who once trusted me completely now treated me like a stranger who couldn't be trusted at all. The lawyer's office was quiet and cold, with dark wood furniture and framed certificates on the walls. We sat around a long table, each of us waiting for the same thing but feeling very different inside. Lauren arrived early and chose the seat closest to the lawyer. She looked calm and certain, like someone who already knew the ending. Other relatives slowly filled the room. Some greeted me politely, others with short nods. I could feel the tension even before a single word was spoken. People whispered to each other in low voices, stopping when I looked in their direction. I kept my hands folded and my eyes down, focusing on my breathing. Lauren crossed her legs and leaned back in her chair. She spoke casually about changes she wanted to make to the main house and how certain rooms would need updating. No one corrected her. No one questioned her confidence. It was clear they had already accepted that everything would belong to her. As I listened, I felt a familiar heaviness settle in my chest. I expected this moment to hurt, but I didn't expect the sense of being erased. It felt like my role in Margaret's life had already been decided by everyone else. I told myself not to react, not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. The lawyer entered with a thick folder and greeted us professionally. He explained the process and reminded us that Margaret had prepared everything carefully. Lauren smiled slightly, as if the words confirmed what she already believed. I stared at the table, preparing myself for disappointment. I thought about all the quiet years of marriage that no one else had seen. I thought about how easily those years had been replaced by assumptions. I wondered if this meeting would be the final proof that my voice no longer mattered. When the lawyer began organizing his papers, the room fell completely silent. Every small sound felt loud, the shifting of chairs, the clearing of throats. I felt exposed, like I was about to be judged without a chance to speak. I didn't expect fairness. I didn't expect kindness. All I expected was confirmation that Lauren's version of events had won. I braced myself for that truth, believing this meeting would be the last time I would sit in a room with my family as anything more than an afterthought. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to read from the document in front of him. His voice was steady and formal, the kind used to reading important words. At first, no one moved. Everyone leaned in slightly, waiting to hear their part of the story. Then he read the first line. He spoke my name clearly and without hesitation. For a moment, I wasn't sure I had heard it correctly. My heart skipped, and I felt the room shift around me. The words that followed were gentle, personal, and unmistakable. Silence filled the space. It wasn't an awkward pause or a polite one. It was the kind of silence that comes when something unexpected lands too hard to ignore. I looked up slowly and saw faces frozen in place. A few people glanced at Lauren, then back at the lawyer. Lauren's expression changed in an instant. The confidence she carried into the room drained from her face. Her smile faded, and her eyes widened slightly, as if someone had taken the ground out from under her. She sat straighter, gripping the arm of her chair. The lawyer continued reading, but that first line had already done its work. It said what I had never said out loud. It spoke of loyalty, presence, and support in a way that felt deeply personal. I felt a tightness in my chest, not from victory, but from recognition. I didn't look at anyone else. I kept my eyes on the table, afraid that if I moved, the moment might disappear. My hands trembled slightly, and I pressed them together to stay still. I could hear my own breathing louder than anything else. Across the table, whispers tried to start but died quickly. No one wanted to be the first to speak. The story they had accepted so easily was cracking, and they could feel it. The air felt heavier, like everyone was holding something they didn't know how to put down. Lauren stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The words on the page had spoken for themselves. That single line changed everything. Without anger or accusation, it exposed the truth that had been buried under assumptions. And in that quiet room, the lie that had followed me for so long began to fall apart. The lawyer continued reading, turning page after page without looking up. With each paragraph, it became clearer that Margaret had thought carefully about every detail. She had kept records, notes, and dates. She described moments of care, long nights, and steady support. She also described pressure she felt, conversations that left her uneasy, and situations where she felt guided instead of heard. The room felt smaller as the truth came out slowly. People shifted in their seats. Some avoided eye contact with Lauren. Others stared at the papers as if they could rewind the words. No one interrupted. The lawyer's voice stayed calm, even as the meaning of the will grew heavier. Lauren's name came up again, but this time the tone was different. The will explained limits and conditions. Her share was not what she expected. It was smaller, divided carefully, and tied to rules that removed control from her hands. There was no anger in the words, only caution and clarity. The lawyer explained that the majority of the estate was placed into trusts. I was named the person responsible for managing them. Decisions required patience, responsibility, and long-term thinking. Margaret had written that this was done to protect what she built, not to reward anyone's behavior. Lauren's breathing became sharp and uneven. She stared at the table, then at the lawyer, then at me. Her hands clenched and unclenched in her lap. She tried to speak once, but no sound came out. Whatever she had planned no longer mattered. I stayed still. I didn't feel joy or pride. I felt steady, like something fragile had finally been placed back where it belonged. I listened carefully, wanting to understand Margaret's wishes fully. This wasn't about winning. It was about responsibility. The lawyer finished explaining how everything would work going forward. He answered a few quiet questions from relatives, keeping his responses short and professional. No one challenged the will. No one defended Lauren. The confidence she had carried into the room was gone. I looked at the window behind the lawyer's desk and watched the light shift slightly. I thought about Margaret and how much effort it must have taken for her to prepare this while dealing with her illness. She had seen more than I realized. She had protected the truth when I didn't know how. When the reading ended, the room felt drained. The masks people had worn slipped away, leaving discomfort behind. I gathered my things slowly, still saying nothing. There was nothing left to explain. The truth had already done that work for me. After the meeting ended, people slowly left the room in silence. Some avoided looking at either of us. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure of what to say. I walked toward the hallway, hoping to leave without another scene. I didn't get far. Lauren followed me out. Her footsteps were fast and uneven. When she spoke, her voice shook with anger. She said my name sharply and told me to stop pretending. Her face was flushed, and her hands were trembling at her sides. She accused me of manipulating her mother behind her back. She said I had filled Margaret's head with lies and fear. She told me I had stolen something that was meant to be hers. Each word came out rushed, like she was afraid of losing control if she stopped talking. I listened without interrupting. For once, I didn't feel the need to protect her feelings. I saw her clearly in that moment, not as my child, but as someone facing consequences she never expected. When she finished, the hallway fell quiet. I took a breath and spoke calmly. I told her I never turned her mother against her. I said I didn't need to. The truth was already there, and it didn't belong to me. It belonged to time, to actions, and to choices made when no one thought they were being watched. Lauren stared at me, shocked by my tone. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't weak either. I told her that Margaret saw everything for herself. She felt pressure. She felt fear. She felt confusion. And she wrote down what she felt so no one could change it later. Lauren's voice softened for a moment, then hardened again. She said none of it was fair. She said she was only trying to help. I didn't argue with her. I told her fairness had nothing to do with it. Trust did. She stepped back slightly, as if my words had pushed her without touching her. Her anger shifted into something else, uncertainty, maybe even fear. She had spent so long controlling the story that she didn't know how to stand without it. I told her I hoped one day she would understand what she lost long before the will was read. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had said exactly what needed to be said. Lauren did not accept what happened quietly. Within weeks, she challenged the will. She claimed her mother had been influenced and confused. She said decisions were made under pressure. It was clear she believed she could still force things to change if she pushed hard enough. What Lauren didn't realize was that Margaret had planned for this. Every part of the will was supported by documents, timelines, and professional evaluations. Doctors' notes confirmed Margaret's clarity. Legal witnesses confirmed her intent. There were safeguards layered carefully, leaving no room for doubt. The process moved quickly. Each challenge Lauren raised was answered before it could grow. The lawyers handling the estate stayed calm and precise. There were no emotional arguments, only facts. One by one, Lauren's claims were dismissed. The legal costs added up fast. Fees came directly from Lauren's remaining portion, just as the will allowed. With every motion she filed, her share grew smaller. She didn't stop, even when advised to. She seemed driven by pride more than hope. As months passed, people around her began to pull away. Friends who once admired her confidence stopped calling. Family members kept their distance. The same certainty she used to control rooms now made people uncomfortable. Conversations ended quickly. Invitations stopped coming. Lauren tried to explain herself, but her words sounded defensive and sharp. Without the support she expected, her confidence cracked. She blamed everyone but herself. The world she thought would side with her stayed silent. I followed the updates from a distance. I didn't interfere. I didn't argue. I let the process run its course. Watching wasn't easy, but stepping in would have changed nothing. This was her fight, and the consequences were hers alone. Eventually, the challenge ended. There was nothing left to contest. What remained of Lauren's inheritance was a fraction of what she once believed was guaranteed. The rest was gone, spent on trying to prove a story that no longer stood. Lauren became quieter after that. Her anger burned out, leaving isolation behind. She had chased control so fiercely that she lost connection instead. People didn't turn against her out of cruelty. They simply stepped away when they saw who she had become. Greed didn't take everything from her at once. It took it piece by piece, trust, support, stability, until she was left standing alone, facing the cost of choices she refused to question. After everything settled, my life stayed mostly the same. I didn't move into a bigger house or buy anything flashy. I kept my routines and my quiet mornings. I found comfort in familiar things, especially after so much noise and tension. I began supporting causes Margaret had cared about deeply. Education had always mattered to her, especially for students who worked hard but lacked support. I helped create scholarships in her name, not to be seen, but to honor what she believed in. It felt right, like continuing a conversation we never finished. There was also a small house by the lake we used to visit years ago. It had fallen into disrepair. I spent time restoring it slowly, carefully, without rushing. Each repair reminded me of moments we shared there, simple meals, long talks, quiet laughter. The house became a place of calm, not escape. I didn't talk much about the estate or the will. When people brought it up, I listened politely and changed the subject. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The truth had already traveled where it needed to go. Over time, some relatives reached out. Their messages were short and careful. A few apologized for believing things without asking. Others admitted they were wrong to judge me. I accepted their words without holding on to the past. I wasn't interested in reopening wounds. What surprised me most was how light I felt. I wasn't carrying anger. I wasn't waiting for anyone to suffer. I simply lived my days with intention and peace. That quiet balance felt like something I had earned. I noticed that when people spoke to me now, they did so with respect. Not because of money, but because of consistency. I hadn't changed my story to defend myself. I had lived it. Margaret used to say that the best answer to cruelty was a full life. I finally understood what she meant. Revenge didn't need to be loud or harsh. It didn't need to hurt anyone. It could be as simple as choosing peace when chaos was expected. In the end, the greatest satisfaction wasn't being proven right. It was waking up each day without bitterness, knowing that dignity had carried me further than anger ever could. Years after everything had passed, I finally understood what Margaret's life, and her careful planning, had really taught me. The money in the estate was not the lesson. The wealth could have disappeared and it wouldn't have changed the truth she left behind. What mattered was the clarity she gave, the careful way she documented her life and the choices she made to protect it. I thought often about Lauren. She had lost her chance long before the lawyers read the will aloud. It wasn't the conditions or the trusts that punished her, it was the path she had chosen. She had prioritized control, ambition, and appearances over honesty and care. By the time she tried to take more than she was meant to, she had already alienated herself from the people who could have mattered most. Her inheritance was just a reflection of what she had done with her own heart. I also learned something about myself. For years, I had assumed speaking up would prove the truth. I had held back, believing love and integrity were enough to show others what really happened. I discovered that time and patience are often stronger than argument. Margaret's careful planning had done what my words could not. The truth doesn't always need a defender, sometimes it simply needs to wait for the right moment to reveal itself. Looking back, I realized that silence can be a kind of power. It isn't about weakness or fear. It's about letting the facts and actions speak louder than anger or accusations. Margaret's gift wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet and deliberate, designed to expose lies and reward honesty in a way that no one could argue with. I also reflected on forgiveness. I never needed to hate Lauren to protect myself. Her mistakes and her choices taught her lessons in their own time. I learned that holding on to resentment only wastes energy. Living with clarity and dignity, not just surviving, but continuing life with intention, is the strongest kind of justice. Now, years later, I live with that understanding every day. I appreciate small moments, the quiet life I built, and the people who stayed true. I know that what Margaret valued most, truth, care, and clarity, was far more powerful than wealth or status. And I understand that the consequences of our actions are often clearer than we realize. Lauren lost much more than money, and I gained something no fortune could ever buy: peace, insight, and the knowledge that truth eventually shows itself. Her lesson is simple, but it runs deep. Life rewards honesty, punishes selfishness, and reveals reality in ways we often don't see at first. And sometimes, the strongest justice doesn't come from fighting, it comes from living, patiently and wisely, in a way that cannot be undone.